Hello, my name is Ever McKinney, and I am an Information Assistant with John Marshall Library. I want to welcome you to this virtual book display on Nancy Drew, one of my all-time favorite book heroines. This virtual display is limited to a variety of Nancy Drew books from my own collection here at home. While I am definitely a fan and collector of Nancy Drew, I should point out that I am not a rare book expert. However, I do have experience assisting with rare book acquisitions for an independent seller, and I also did some studies about Nancy Drew books during graduate school. This virtual display is inspired by an actual display that I hope to mount in John Marshall's display cases once we are open again. The year 2020 is indeed Nancy Drew's 90th birthday. The first Nancy Drew novel, The Secret of the Old Clock, was published on April 28, 1930. Unfortunately, I do not have one of these to show you, so pictured here is an image of this iconic cover from a poster that I have in my collection. What many people don't realize is that many writers, both men and women, were ghostwriters under the name Carolyn Keene. This name was also invented by Nancy Drew's creator, Edward Stratemeyer. The character Nancy Drew can now be enjoyed in multiple series books, movies, television shows, computer games, graphic novels, and comic books. It is also worth mentioning that her image can be seen on puzzles, clothing, artworks, jewelry, even collectible fabric, and other accessories. The first ghostwriter for Nancy Drew was Mildred Lillian Augustine Wirt Benson. Benson wrote 23 out of the first 30 Nancy Drew novels, and also wrote under other pen names for series such as Penny Parker, Dana Girls, Madge Sterling, and Ruth Darrow. The book pictured here is a biography in my collection that I believe is still in print, suitable for young teen readers. It is interesting to note that Benson herself was a real-life Nancy Drew, pursuing higher education at a time when few women were able, working as a reporter for newspapers, becoming a travel writer and exploring many different countries, and also obtaining her own pilot's license. Nancy Drew has had many illustrators throughout her 90 years. Pictured here is almost the exact same book, but with 3 covers from Nancy Drew's 3 most prolific illustrators. The book cover on the left was done by Russell Tandy, who primarily illustrated volumes of the 1930s and 40s. If you look inside books that contain his black and white illustrations, you'll notice that he often includes a bold signature, pictured here from one of the books I have here at home. Next, we have Bill Gillies, who illustrated dust jackets during the 1940s and 50s. You'll notice that his signature style almost always has Nancy Drew with a look of surprise or shock on her face. Not all of his jackets have this, but many of them do. Then we have Rudy Nappy, who illustrated Nancy Drew covers during the 60s and 70s, namely on these iconic yellow books that many of us know and love. You may also recognize him from the Hardy Boys books. His style reflected a very mod Nancy Drew, as well as the sensibilities of the 60s and 70s. So again, one book with 3 very different artistic interpretations. If you are a Nancy Drew collector like me, you are probably aware of all the nuances that make a Nancy Drew book a collectible book. There are different types of editions, dust jackets, covers and bindings, end papers, spines, differences in advertisements, all kinds of differences that really make collecting a challenge, kind of like a lifelong Nancy Drew mystery. I won't be able to address all of these differences here today, but I have enough examples in my own collection that I can share some basic information. What we have in the 1930s up until the late 1950s are the Nancy Drew Blue books. These all came with those beautifully illustrated dust jackets by artists like Russell Tandy. Underneath the jacket, the boards of the book were typically blue, with the lettering in orange, and this now iconic silhouette of Nancy Drew in the middle. For a short period of time, the blue books were also published with dark blue lettering and silhouettes, and consequently these books are a little bit harder to find than the orange ones. This copy actually belonged to my grandmother, and when you open it, you get these nice end papers with the classic silhouette enlarged into a scene. I want to note that the true first editions of books 1 through 7 of the 1930s have these blue covers, but no silhouettes, just the lettering. So if you have one of those first editions in your collection, definitely hang on to it and treasure it. We also have other types of blue covers that were introduced in the 50s, and we refer to these as tweed boards because they have that woven look to them. You can see that Nancy Drew's silhouette is still there, but has evolved a little bit. She still has her magnifying glass, but she now has flat shoes. These tweed books also came with colorful dust jackets, and I do have a few of these pictured here, 2 by Russell Tandy on the right, and 1 by Rudy Nappy on the left. Books printed in the 1940s are also special for another reason. You may notice that they have radically different paper quality because paper rationing was on, and resources were primarily directed toward war efforts. Many Nancy Drew books at this time have this special notice printed on the title page, indicating that the book is complete even though the paper is subpar. I have to say that these are my absolute favorite types of Nancy Drew books to collect, because even though war rationing was a major part of life at this time, Nancy Drew still made it into the hands of readers. The yellow volumes of the 60s and 70s are some of the most easily recognizable Nancy Drew books. At this time, revisions were made to the first 34 Nancy Drew books, and what is called the picture cover was introduced. While picture covers were typically illustrated by Rudy Nappy, the back of the books held a wide variety of information, from lists of available Nancy Drew titles to advertisements, like this one you see on the bottom left for the Nancy Drew cookbook. The blank back cover you see next to it comes from a copy of The Mystery of the Brass-Bound Trunk, and it is the only blank back cover I have in my collection. I honestly can't tell you why it is blank, but it is fun to have. As you can see from the 2 pictures in the middle, Nancy Drew's corner image also evolved. The lower image of the bar-coded book comes from this 1985 copy of The Hidden Staircase. Barcodes are a great age indicator for collectible books, as barcodes weren't in common usage until the mid-1970s. I want to address a few things about revised editions. Just before the yellow picture covers took off, content was revised and edited from the original 34 books. Changes were made to Nancy's image and personality, and major revisions also eliminated content offensive to African Americans and Jewish people. As you can imagine, there is a lot of discussion around revisions. To my knowledge, other culturally offensive content, for example involving Asians, has not been removed from Nancy Drew books. This is a negative aspect of Nancy Drew history, but it is important to acknowledge it, as well as acknowledge that this is a part of the history of children's literature and publishing in general. Newly published Nancy Drew incarnations, such as comic books, now tend to feature a more inclusive cast of characters. Nancy Drew's ability to adapt and change with the times is also a major part of Nancy Drew history. There are so many different editions of Nancy Drew, not including the number of editions published overseas. Pictured here on the left is a twin thriller edition featuring 2 Nancy Drew stories in one book. The book in the middle is called a cameo edition, for the cameo profile of Nancy Drew on the cover. These editions came with dust jackets, and sadly I am missing the jacket to this one. The last image on the right is called a book club edition. These editions are a little larger than the typical Nancy Drew book, and also come with dust jackets. If you want to reread some of the yellow books, or try one of the newly published Nancy Drew series, you can check these out through Fairfax County Public Library. FCPL currently offers Nancy Drew mystery stories, as well as the newer Nancy Drew Girl Detective, Nancy Drew and the Clue Crew, and the Nancy Drew Diaries. While our libraries are currently closed, you can also access e-book and e-audio Nancy Drew books using Overdrive and RB Digital on your favorite reading device. Please use the library's live chat service, Ask Your Library, or contact us through our library website for any account assistance. That is all the time I have for today. I hope you enjoyed this virtual book display celebrating Nancy Drew's 90th birthday. Thank you for watching, and please be safe.